Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. I hope you managed to have a bit of a break and also something to eat. We are now ready to begin with the program for the afternoon. And this afternoon we will be focusing on quality assurance frameworks. And I would like to welcome the session organizer, Mr. Jonathan Koo. He is the Director of Public Finance at the Australian Bureau of Statistics, and Jonathan has worked for more than 17 years in the statistical system. Jonathan is also very engaged in the regional economic program on economic statistics. He is one of the co-chairs of the steering group for the program, and Jonathan has also during the past year led a task force on quality assurance frameworks. So we have definitely the right chair for this. Welcome, Jonathan, and thank you very much for organizing this session. Let me also briefly welcome the people who will be presenting, who have been submitting papers. This is Henny Wulandari from Statistics Indonesia, Engsaya Dambijansen from the National Statistical Office of Mongolia, and Dulce Regala from the Philippines Statistics Authority. So welcome to all of you, and Jonathan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rike, and welcome back, everyone. I think today's session on quality assurance is quite timely. I think quality came up a number of times both this morning as well as in the as a session at side event lunchtime session on looking at the core set capacity screening. So I think talking about quality assurance frameworks and practices is actually a very timely event. Interestingly enough, I was reflecting on some of the statistics that we heard at the side event that Nalima went through, and one of the ones that stuck in my mind was that 51% of countries reported that they use a quality assurance framework. So that's around only half of countries who responded. So that to me is something that it shows some of the challenges that we have, and it'll be interesting to see how that looks this time around when we do the screening this year. So just an outline today of the session that we're going to be having this afternoon. So I'm going to talk about the regional program in economic statistics, although I probably won't need to do it in too much detail as we've already spoken about it in some length. And I guess the role of quality assurance both in that and also more broadly from an NSO perspective. I'm also going to talk through some quality assurance frameworks and their applications, and I think just to give some examples of how quality assurance is taken at a country level. The presenters are then going to talk about some of their experiences with quality assurance practices, both in terms of frameworks and also around specific quality initiatives. And then I will be opening the floor for questions and having a bit of an open floor discussion, and that will be after the break. So the regional program in economic statistics, Rike went through this a little bit earlier, but you've got a list of all the statistics there. It's really around having the actual program is looking at capacity, and it's the capacity to produce and disseminate this core set of statistics in accordance with international standards. And the goal is to try to ensure that all countries have that capacity by 2020. The group's steered by the program is steered by is governed by a steering group, and that's where Rika mentioned I'm a co-chair of that group. And to facilitate the aim of the project, a task force was established for quality assurance framework, and that was established at the last meeting. And I thank my colleagues from Turkey, Seychelles, Mongolia, Armenia and the ESCAP Secretariat who helped contribute to this session, both in terms of some of the material that I'll be presenting or the presentations that they're providing themselves today. So why is quality assurance important for statistical systems? I've got a quote up there by someone, some of you might have seen before, Deming. Deming's actually I guess, famous for a couple of different reasons. One is he's actually did a lot of work around total quality management. So that's something that goes a bit beyond just us from a statistics point of view, but it's looking at total quality management from a broader production process point of view. And he spent time in Japan and other places trying to understand that. But interestingly enough, he was also a statistician, and he was one of the people working in the US, pioneered, I guess, some of the sampling methods that we use on a day-to-day basis in many of our national statistical offices. But I think this quote is quite useful in terms of understanding the context around quality assurance. So it says, "In God we trust, all others must bring data." And I guess what he means by that is that data is a very, very important part of the evidence base that we use to make decisions, and it's really part of the information set that key users like government or other people in the community are utilised to make sure that good decisions are made in an informed way. But trying to make sure that having the statistics is one thing, they really need to be used as well. And one of the ways that we as NSOs can ensure that statistics are being used is to make sure that the data can be trusted. If the data can't be trusted, then it's not going to be utilised by our users. So that's where quality assurance frameworks can come in. Quality assurance and assessment processes, they really provide credibility that supports the use of statistical information by decision makers. So really, statistics are one thing, but the quality of them and how you make sure that you can independently assure that quality is part of making, is just as important in some respects as the statistics themselves. I think there's some other benefits as well for quality assurance. So if quality assurance processes are set up well, they can facilitate, I guess, ongoing continuous improvement. So ways that you can continue to make sure that your statistics are of the best quality possible. It potentially also identifies areas for resolution, and also, I guess, think about, it provides, I guess, a framework that you and your colleagues in NSOs can discuss the quality of statistics. It gives greater transparency to the processes by which the quality is assured. So particularly if the frameworks are well known, then those are things that can be used by others, because there's an understanding in terms of the different dimensions that are used there. And I'll be talking about some of the international frameworks a little bit later. But one of the parts, I guess, and the features of those is that there's perhaps more in common in those than there are differences. In terms of assessing quality, there is a fair amount of convergence in terms of what are the important dimensions of quality. They provide a basis for creating and maintaining a quality culture within the organisation. So it gives an opportunity again to look at that, making sure that continuous improvement is front of mind, to make sure that the organisation is thinking about how can we make sure that we're getting the most out of our statistics. And finally, it's a mechanism for the exchange of ideas of quality management with other producers of statistics within NSOs like ourselves. And I think it sort of gives us, I guess, a common language that we can talk about in terms of when we're looking at assessing the quality of our statistics. So when we're looking at quality assurance practices, I guess I wanted to sort of make a little bit of distinction here between, I guess, a data quality framework and more broadly around, I guess, a concept of quality, from a process point of view. So total quality management was something I mentioned before, and I guess total quality management is something that goes a bit beyond just statistical processes. Total quality management is, I guess, looking at the whole process. It looks at it looks at not only the production process but also other aspects like management and leadership and the support processes around that your organisation is using, and it's looking at continuous improvement around all those. Data quality frameworks are really, I guess, a subset of that to an extent, and they really do focus explicitly around the statistical aspects of the business, and the dimensions are really drawn from these four sort of areas around user needs, statistical products, production processes, and the institutional environment. We discussed quite a bit on that last one, the institutional environment, this morning, and that's obviously one where making sure that we have a strong institutional environment is very, very important. But from the context of a data quality framework, it's just one part of a broader set of considerations and dimensions that are being considered. So, a bit about frameworks. So there are international guidelines, and many of you would be already aware of that, and some of these are listed up here. So there's the United Nations National Quality Assessment Framework, the IMF Data Quality Assessment Framework, and Eurostat Quality Assessment Framework of the European Statistical System. So each of these frameworks, as I mentioned, do have some similarities in the sense that they break down statistics into different components, and the processes involved in them into different components, and they can be used for an independent assessment of quality. And each of them have, I guess, a different mandate that govern their use for official statistics. So I've got a table here which I guess looks at some of those comparing some of those factors across those different frameworks. So you can see that in terms of there's different legal or supporting frameworks and how they're applied. But one thing, I guess, in terms of interesting in terms of having a look at those, if you look at the fourth column, the dimensions of quality, whilst there are some differences there in terms of the specific dimensions, I think there's a lot more similarities in terms of how they actually, what are considered some of those key dimensions. So these I guess are a summary of the international best practice in terms of quality assurance. I'm just going to go through a couple of local examples before handing over to the speakers who'll go through some specific case studies. So this is an example from my home country, Australia. We have a national data quality framework called the ABS Data Quality Framework. Has seven dimensions, and they are, like I said, very similar to the ones that we've seen before. The seven that we use are institutional environment, relevance, timeliness, accuracy, coherence, interpretability, and accessibility. And for each of our statistical publications, each of them will have what's known as a data quality or quality declaration. So I've got a screenshot of one of those there. If you might not be able to see the detail, but that's for our labour force publication. And basically, it provides a short summary of each of those against each of those dimensions for all our statistics. This is another example from Turkey, where there is a national certification program by Turkstat. So they have a framework that's introduced what's called a quality logo, and so that's available for statistics that fulfil a quality assessment evaluation. So you might not be able to see it very well, but the last two statistics there, you can see that there's a tick on those. So that's the quality logo that's given to statistics that fulfil the quality assessment. And there's a number of dimensions of which quality is considered. So there's 10 that are used to make that assessment, and these are the adequacy of resources, statistical confidentiality, impartiality and objectivity, methodological soundness, appropriate statistical procedures, user orientation, accessibility and reliability, timeliness, coherence and comparability, accessibility and transparency. So those are the examples from specific countries. I'm going to pause here now and hand over to my colleagues to go through some of their presentations now. The presentations for this session are I guess, twofold. One set of presentations are around, I guess, the data quality practices, and the first one from Henny will give an example of that. And then the second set of presentations, I guess, are around the frameworks and how they're applied in different countries. So the first presentation is from Henny Wulandari. Henny has worked in official statistics at Statistics Indonesia, or BPS, for almost 10 years. She's currently a member of the Directorate of Financial Information Technology and Tourism Statistics at BPS, and has experience in compiling social statistics and distribution statistics. So before I hand over to Henny, what I'll do is I'm asking each of the speakers to go through their presentations now. And what we'll do is, if you can keep your questions till after the break, we'll have the open discussion after that. So Henny, I'll pass over to you.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Before I start this presentation, I would like to thank ESCAP for giving us such a great opportunity and for arranging this event. And also, I want to introduce you to my partner, Amanda Pratamaputra, who sat there. Today, we'd like to deliver our presentation titled Machine Learning Approach for Data Quality Assurance, a Case Study in Economic Census 2016 Data Correction. This presentation will be divided into 5 parts. The first part is background, second part is literature review, the third part is data and methodology, and then we will continue to the results, which is the fourth part, and the last one is the conclusion. As we know, the demands of high-quality data have been increasing significantly over time. It's because this data will be used for planning, decision-making, and evaluating regulation and policies by the government and many stakeholders. In response to this matter, BPS, or Statistics Indonesia, will implement statistical quality assurance framework, which comprises 8 dimensions: relevance, accuracy, punctuality and timeliness, interpretability, accessibility, coherence, comparability, and trustworthiness. But in this paper, we only emphasize the aspect of accuracy and punctuality and timeliness. According to Chapman, data correction or data cleansing becomes crucial in order to improve the quality of data. It's because data correction relates to the detecting and removing errors and inconsistencies from data. However, in order to correct the inconsistencies, BPS or Statistics Indonesia still uses traditional approach by checking the data manually. As we know, manual checking is laborious, time-consuming, and prone to errors. Therefore, we offer a new approach, supervised machine learning, or SML for short, as a better way for data correction. SML is a technique to make a computer learns the patterns from the empirical data set and then automatically predicts the variable. Thus, the data correction process can be done automatically, maintain the accuracy, and moreover, improve the timeliness. In this paper, the research question is, are SML techniques feasible for data correction? Secondly, since we use 2 well-known SML techniques, support vector machine, or SVM for short, and random forest, or RF for short, So which technique has a better performance? And the last one, what is the optimum training dataset required to build the classifier? There are many literatures that review the use of machine learning approach for data correction. One of them is Giorgetti and Sebastiani that have formulated the problem of automated survey coding as a text categorization problem. The other one is Korea and Okamoto, who use a 4-vector machine to classify economic activities codes called CNAE, or National Classification of Economic Activities in Brazil. Another one is Su and Lee introduced the details of random forest algorithm for text classification using a benchmark corpus from the SOGO laboratory text categorization. In this study, we use establishment data from Economic Census 2016 in West Java province. The data consists of IC code, description of main activity and main product, and the establishment name as well. The experiment is limited to the general section, which are I6 section I, accommodation and food service activities, and section R, arts, entertainment, and recreation. It has been found that the IC code of many establishments cannot be addressed to their main activity correctly. Thus, the IC variable will be corrected by using machine learning techniques based on the information of main activity, main product, and the establishment name. The idea is to use the text description in main activity and main product that has been coded manually by the expert as a training data set, and then use to predict the IC code for the new unlabeled description establishment. Each of these techniques, SVM and RF, is divided into 3 steps: pre-processing data, training classifier, and then analysis and evaluation. For the step 1, we do filtering, stemming, tokenization, stopwords removal, numbers and special character removal, sparse term removal, and TF.IDF token weighting. This table shows the distribution after the pre-processing stage. On the left is section I, and on the right is section R. In step 2, we do the training classifier for each techniques. The classifier learns the pattern from the correctly coded dataset, which is called training set. And then the classifier is used to predict the code of test set. And the final step is analysis and evaluation. We use remeasurements to evaluate the performance of the classifier, agreement rates, production rates, and speed. Agreement rates is the percentage of the automatically generated codes that agree with the manual assigned codes. Production rate represents the percentage of codes that can be generated automatically. The speed represents the length of time required to perform the coding process automatically. And this is the result of SML performance using 20% of training sets. This graph shows us the agreement rate decrease along with the increase of production rate. In section R, this is the section R, both techniques, SVM and RF, have similar result. At 50% level of production rate, the agreement rate of both techniques is around 98%. But when we increase the production rate at 100% level, the performance are about 91%. So the increase of production rate will not reduce the agreement rate significantly. On the other hand, this is the graph of the section I. And both techniques have big difference. When we increase the production rate, the reduction of agreements on RF model is not as drastically as on SVM models. And this is the result for the relationship between the amount of training data and correction performance. In section R, both models are slightly different. The production rates increase gradually until reaching at the 20% of training size. After that point, the production rate remains steady for both models. On the contrary, in section R, this is section R, section I, there are big differences in both models. It shows that RF model has a better performance and more consistent than SVM model in every number of training size. SVM model shows a significant increase at 20% level, but then remains steady after that point. Finally, based on the result above, we conclude that a new approach that we offer, SML, supervised machine learning, is feasible for data correction, and both models all perform well. Furthermore, the level of accuracy is quite high, even with the small size of training set. We use only 20% of training set. For both sections, RF or random forest model has superior accuracy and proves to be powerful classifier with the agreement rates are more than 90%. In terms of training set, the addition of training size does not increase the classifier performance significantly. Therefore, we recommend that 20% of training size is quite sufficient to train the classifier. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Henny. Can you join me in thanking Henny for her presentation? Okay, so we'll now pass on to Engzaya. Engzaya is the Senior Statistician of the Economic Statistics Department in the National Statistics Office in Mongolia. She's got a master's degree from the University of Queensland in Australia, not very far away from where I live, so there you go. And the university and bachelor degree from University of Finance and Economics of Mongolia. So Ms. Engzaya is currently working as a Senior Statistician at the Economic Statistics Department. Engzaya, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present my paper entitled on Quality Assurance Framework for Economic Statistics in Mongolia. Yeah. I try to focus on Consumer Price Index, and the outline consists of 4 parts. And data quality is the totality of characteristics of statistics for user satisfaction based on fitness for use. The quality dimension for quality assessment are relevance, accuracy, and punctuality, and accessibility, and also comparability. Statistical data of high quality is based on international standards from the foundation for improving the evidence-based decision-making process of government institution, business, and citizen in Mongolia, and also enabling the government to monitor progress towards national development goals and also increasing user satisfaction. The main aims of activities in the quality management are raising the skills and the awareness for quality issues at the Mongolian National Statistical Office and also regional offices, ministries, and other data providers, and to supply relevant, timely, and reliable data to users. In terms of official statistics, there are two main laws in Mongolia: law on statistics and law on population and housing census. The law on statistics was adopted in 1994, but there were several revisions aimed at making the major document comprehensive and detailed. In the national legal framework, we have been implemented the program for development of official statistics in Mongolia since 2006. Now we are turning to implement third phase of the development program of official statistics. In addition to the law on statistics, there are other frameworks for quality assurance on statistics. The quality policy for the Mongolian official statistics is based on the European Statistics Code of Practice. This document identifies 8 major principles for quality management of statistics. The standards and the indicators also correspond with the international standards. So it means that they promote constant improvement of the statistics product and the enhancement of staff involvement and focus on users' needs, and point to the criticality of developing quality assurance procedures and also strong leadership for preparing accurate and relevant statistics, and highlight the importance of creating a comprehensive system for managing and monitoring Mongolian national statistical system. There are also the standards for the quality management of the Mongolian official statistics. This standard involves a set of indicators aimed at coordinating Mongolian national statistical system and developing statistics, communicating statistical data, and offering official statistical products and delivering statistical services. There are 15 groups of indicators that correspond with the 8 criteria of high-quality statistical products and services. Mongolian Code of Practice consists of 15 principles and also 66 indicators. Mongolian National Statistical Office has set up a quality team under the administration department, and team members from different departments. There are 16 members, and the team is responsible for develop quality policy and to create quality management framework in statistical system. Team has developed guidelines for quality reports, and we have developed user-oriented quality report for consumer price indexes and producer-oriented quality reports for the consumer price index and livestock census. Since 1991, NSO has been compiling consumer price index using the International Labour Organization's recommendations of IMF experts. So the price, there are several policies and also documents for estimation of consumer price indexes. The first one is law on statistics, and we have also methodology for compiling consumer price indexes, and also we developed CPI product catalog. So the prices of the main 20 commodities are taken every week, and the weights derived from household social economic survey. The main use of the consumer price index is measurement of the price and price inflation experienced by households. And the current base reference period is 2015. And there are only 2 officers responsible for compilation of consumer price indexes at the National Statistical Office, and 7 from the capital city and also districts, and 21 staff from regions. And we disseminate weekly prices and also monthly consumer price indexes and through our organization's website and also statistics bulletin and as well as statistical yearbook. And for the quality control, for CPI is quality control is a system of routine checking activities which is measured to control the quality of a product. It's the collected data. The quality control system is designed to provide regular and consistent checks to ensure data integrity, also correctness and completeness, and also to identify the address errors. Mongolian National Statistical Office validates the prices to compile the indexes and also allocates budget for monitoring price data, and also officers from NSO visit to outlets to monitor the prices. There are several results we have achieved within the quality framework. First one is data collection is mandatory under the law on statistics, and we established a quality team, and the team developed 2 main documents in terms of the quality assurance framework. Within the statistical process, methodologies in accordance with the international standards are approved on economic statistics. And we have also started to prepare user-oriented quality reports and also producer-oriented quality reports for the CPI and also livestock censuses. There are a number of activities we are expecting to do near future. So first one is developing guidelines for an effective error policy and handbook of glossary for quality, and assess the quality of selected statistics. And for improving the CPI estimation, we need to improve of the data quality at the sub-regions level, and also estimation of seasonal adjusted consumer price indexes, and imputation methods for calculating the indexes. And the last one is also improvement of the monitoring and validating the price data. So in the long run, we are achieving to promote the implementation of quality principles and also to enhance the image of the Mongolian National Statistical Office as a high-quality information provider. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ensaya. Okay, the final presenter from this session is Dulcie Regala. Dulcie is the Assistant National Statistician at the Philippine Statistics Authority. She is responsible for technical and administrative leadership for the production of business and agricultural statistics in the Philippines. Dulcie is a very experienced official statistician with over 40 years' experience in official statistics, with particular experience in industry statistics and census. Dulcie, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Before I do the presentation, let me extend our gratefulness for inviting us to this seminar, together with my colleagues. In the presentation, we will share with you the strategies that we have undertaken in subscribing to the quality framework. And in the presentation, I have about 41 slides, and I will ensure that I can deliver it in 10 minutes. So the outline of my presentation consists of 5 topics. These are an introduction about the Philippine Statistics Authority, which is just 4 years old, and a history and evolution in the production of establishment-based surveys, since we were producing establishment-based statistics since 1903. Most of us are not yet born at that time. And then another topic is about the legal framework and statistical policy that defines our work. Now, the third topic is about the quality assurance framework that we subscribe, the framework and then the dimensions of quality, the strategies that we have implemented to achieve the dimensions of quality. And then I will be sharing with you the challenges that we face, and lastly, the way forward. So, the Philippine statistical system has been reorganized 4 years ago, and the legal framework is Republic Act 10625 that merges the 4 agencies in the government: the National Statistics Office, the Bureau of Agricultural Statistics from the Department of Agriculture, the Bureau of Labor Statistics from the Department of Labor, and the National Statistical Coordination Board. And that the law provides us the mandate to plan, develop, disseminate, and enforce policies about general purpose statistics and civil registration activities. And it defines also our primary responsibility in national censuses, sectoral statistics, consolidation of selected administrative recording systems, and the compilation of national accounts. And that mandate also defines our functions. Among those functions is the conduct of periodic censuses on population, agriculture, fisheries, business, industry, and other sectors of the economy. And we will prepare and conduct statistical sample surveys on all aspects of socioeconomic activities in the country. So with that, we have a mission. We had formulated vision and mission for the office, which is a solid, responsive, world-class authority on quality statistics and civil registration. And in order to deliver relevant, reliable statistics and civil registration services for equitable development towards improved quality of life for all Filipinos. So the next slides discusses about the history and evolution of establishment-based surveys. I will not dwell too much on this, but it just shows you how establishment-based surveys in the Philippines evolved up to the present, because there were 15 censuses of establishment conducted since 1903, with the first and the second one was in 1939. But irregularly, these are the censuses that were conducted by the Philippines. So the latest census of establishment was in 2012, which was a rider of the 2012 Census of Agriculture and Fisheries. And we had the data already in our website. For the annual survey of Philippine business and industry, there were already 45 annual surveys of establishment conducted by the Philippines, that is since 1956, starting with the survey of manufacturers. And continually, we do the improvement in terms of coverage, in terms of geographic classification, and the industrial classification for these surveys. So the latest one is the 2016 ASPBI. So we have also quarterly survey of Philippine businesses in the industry. This was conducted since the late 60s. And this survey provides the data for the national accounts. We do it regularly. And we have also another survey. This is the monthly integrated survey of selected industries, which provide indicators on the manufacturing activities in the country. It started actually with a survey from the Department of Trade and Industry, and this was merged into the monthly survey of the former National Statistics Office. Currently, we're doing this on a monthly basis. Then there's also a producer's price survey, which we undertook since 1980 and until now. Okay? So these are all the surveys that we undertake on establishments. So what are the legal frameworks for this undertaking and the statistical policy? One, I have already mentioned about the law, that is the 10625, or the creation of the Philippine Statistics System, which this morning we have discussed about the coordination aspects of the Philippine Statistical System, because the law provides for the creation of a PSA board which coordinates the activities of the Philippine Statistical System. And the PSA board is the highest policy making on statistical matters in the Philippines. And there is also an executive order which supplements the law in terms of providing a designation on the statistical activities for adoption by the government. And the census, the annual survey, the quarterly survey, the MISI are designated statistical activities which ensure the provision of budget for these surveys. And then we have another law. This is actually a law that defines the conduct of and ethical standards of public officials and employees. This supplements also our legal framework. And then operationally, we are institutionalizing a census compliance project to compel non-compliant establishment to provide us the data. This is in coordination with the Department of Justice in the Philippines. And we also adhere to a clearance process for the surveys that we undertake, so that duplications in terms of the production of industrial statistics are avoided. And the data quality framework provides us a basis for recognition to regional and provincial offices that excelled, here having high ratings on timeliness and quality of reports, and this motivates the regional and provincial offices to improve their performance on statistical operation. So it is a reward being used for providing rewards to the field offices in the production of industrial statistics. So this is actually the quality framework that we subscribe. This is from the International Recommendation for Industrial Statistics by IMF. And there are several dimensions. I think there are 6. Relevance. So how do we attain the degree of relevance? So the data from the survey actually provides data for the systems of national accounts, for sustainable development goals, particularly on SDG 9, and generating MSME, that is micro, small, and medium establishment or data. And then we provide the surveys provides information on updating the business registers or the list of establishments. And then we generate certain indicators in terms of value added, labor productivity, average compensation, and the data from the establishment-based surveys are used in evaluating the performance of industries at the national and regional level. And for this also, we are maintaining a data enclave for researchers, meaning to say the microdata are available now to researchers, but this is not available online, it's just available in the office in one computer. The second dimension is interpretability of the data, and actually we use concepts and methodologies so that we can actually have the data being interpreted by other agencies. We provide technical notes or explanatory text to our data that is being disseminated. And then we use classification standards, that is the Philippine Standard Industrial Classification, which is aligned with ISEC Rev 4, and then we have also Philippine Standard Geographic Classification. This provides consistencies to all the surveys that we are actually producing. Then accuracy, how do we have it? So we adopt statistical methodologies in the conduct of censuses in terms of establishing concepts and definition, defining the coverage of survey, and maintaining statistical business register of the list of establishment, which is the frame of the establishment survey. And a dimension of quality, we utilize sampling methodology. And then to cover the formal sector of the economy, since its contribution to total value added per sector is between 80 to 100%. And there are about 300,000 establishments in the formal sector, and around 256,000 are in scope of the business establishment-based survey. Okay. So this describes the methodology that we use for CPBI and ASPBI, also for QSPBI and MISI. And then on screen is the questionnaire design for the 4 surveys. And we utilize several questionnaires for the annual survey, one type of questionnaire for QSPBI, and for the monthly survey of manufacturing establishment, we use a shuttle type of questionnaire. And for data processing, there is, we maintain an establishment data management system on data entry, data validation, summary file report, completeness check, and tabulation. This is online with the field offices. And considering that we adhere to a system of designated statistics, this brings up a timeliness to the data that we produce. And the timetable of activities, it is a guide to all of us in the production of the data. And the timetable of activities are actually formulated during the planning workshop done before the year of the conduct of the survey. And this is done along with other division of the office. And then we also maintain an online monitoring and tracking system that actually monitor the compliance or the activities 24/7, anytime, anywhere. And this is secured online system available at the PSA website for sample respondents to accomplish. As to coherence, this is actually ensured by the use of standard classification and the concepts that we use in the survey. As to accessibility, the PSA communicates our products and services through different media, and the information are released through special or press releases, e-copy or printed publication, through the data dissemination and the PSA open data portal. And on screen are the web link of the various products that we use, that we produce for this survey. And this is an example on screen of the e-copy publication and the printed copy of the publication. And then we undertake a data dissemination fora at the national and regional level, wherein all responding establishments are invited for them to actually feel the result of the survey. And then we have, aside from the data enclave, we are also launching the open data portal, wherein you will see the time series data of all the survey that we are producing for establishment-based surveys. And then what are the challenges for us? The hindrances in the effective use of the online system are still being encountered, such as the slow and intermittent internet connection and circumstances beyond our control. The internet rate in the Philippines is still low. And then we have also encountering response fatigue for some respondents, considering that we have 4 establishment-based survey. And then we have also a manpower deficit. But we are currently in the process of filling up the vacant positions, considering that we are just reorganized 4 years ago. So the way forward. So we will be actually continuing the enhancement of our computer systems to be updated. And then we will try to, as much as possible, to adapt to modern technology in its processes. Online processing for ASPBI, the monthly survey and the PPS, and then the online accomplishment by respondents of the questionnaire. And then the last one is the provision of capacity building and trainings to develop, enhance the skills of the PSA statisticians. Okay, thank you, and salamat.
Thank you, Dulcie. Now, Dulcie, you have another presentation on the CPI as well. So did you want to go through that one as well?
Yes.
Pass back to you.
Yes, I'll go directly to the framework that we are using. So I have, for this presentation, I have the same topic. So I will not go to the introduction and the background. I'll go directly to topic number 3, the data quality assurance framework for the CPI, some conclusions, recommendation, and lessons from quality assurance experience. So as a background for the CPI, actually for the data quality assurance framework, the Consumer Price Index in the Philippines was formerly called the Cost of Living Index. And then the weights are taken from the Family Income and Expenditure Survey. And we started rebasing the CPI since 1941. And the latest rebasing is 2006. And rebasing to 2012 and is being currently undertaken. And we hope to shift to a chain-based method for this year, for the CPI, so that we will not be rebasing every now and then. So the components of the CPI are, we have a base period, we have a market basket, the weights, the coverage, the sample area, and the frequency of price collection. The base period is set to 100, and the current base now is 2006, but we have rebased it already to 2012, and hopefully we will be chaining the index so that we will not be rebasing. And the market basket are the sample of goods and services that are commonly purchased and bought by an average Filipino household. We have actually 39,000, more than 39,000 commodities in all. And then this is from the result of the commodity outlet survey, and the commodities classified under the COICOP. The weights are derived from the FIES, and the subnational weights are computed in proportion to the national weight. We estimate it. And the geographic coverage, we follow the standard Philippine Standard Geographic Code, and it is based on 4 well-established levels of geographic political subdivisions of the country, such as the region, the province, the municipality, and the barangay. And for our sample area coverage, we capture those from the National Capital Region. And then for areas outside the National Capital Region, we take outlets in the provincial capital of the region and for some sample municipalities. And the frequency of price collection, in this slide, we define how the data are to be collected to ensure coherence and comparability of the monthly figures that we have. So you see, there is monthly, there is weekly, twice a year, and start of the school year, depending on the type of commodity that we collect. So the source of information are usually the price quotation that are collected from sample outlets and store. And these are the basis of the sample source are, it depends on their popularity, consistency and completeness of stock, the permanency of outlet, and the geographic location. And we have a price collection tool. This is a printed survey form, but these are contained in a Android-based handheld device, which ensure us that the data are actually collected from the source outlet, the outlet stores for CPI. And we also have some web scraping of the data so that we will not be collecting it from the, this web scraping ensures us to have data from all the sources that is being, that we have to get the data. And the price collection system, there is a price tag application for the Android-based device, which is capable of recording price quotation, imputation, and the use of GPS in coordinating of sample stores, and sending the price quotation via SMS or internet to the central office. And the data validation procedure is contained in that Android-based device so that we will be getting consistent data for our monthly survey. This is the process flow for the production of the consumer price index. And then the current practice for items with quality or quantity adjustment, there's a certain procedure wherein we follow in having imputation for data that are not available, currently available. And for our dissemination, we actually have a monthly press release 5 days after the reference month. For the headline Consumer Price Index, the core inflation rate, and the seasonality adjusted Consumer Price Index and inflation rate. And we have also quarterly survey special releases 30 days after the reference quarter. For the Consumer Price Index in inflation rate for the bottom 30% of the income household. This actually, the Consumer Price Index for the bottom 30% is an indicator or proxy indicator for poverty. What are our best practices? We have our methodologies for the consumer production of the CPI are actually reviewed and approved by an IAC on price statistics. And we are now using modern technology to improve our processes in the compilation of the CPI. And we do regular spot checking and back checking of price quotation. And lastly, we participate in the international comparison projects that may help improve the processes of the CPI compilation. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dulcie. I'm just going to make a couple of reflections before we head off to break. So I think there are a couple of points I think the presentations had highlighted to me in terms of, I guess, some key areas to think about, and perhaps these are things that we can think about in the session after the break. So the first point I'd make is that data quality frameworks is about transparency and openness, particularly in the strengths and weaknesses of data. So I think in the presentations that we've heard today, as well as in other data quality assessments, one of the key, I guess, principles that we're looking to get to is to having a transparent understanding of the processes that are being undertaken and how statistics are being compiled, so that they can be used by our users in the way that they were intended. I think that certainly in the discussion there that Dulcie just mentioned, there's some key areas in terms of how things like the CPI. There's a lot of components that are required to put that together, and having an understanding of each of those components is a critical part of making sure that it can be well understood. Second point I'd make is around, I guess, the link with international standards that I mentioned before. So I think in all the presentations, there was a discussion about how did they link into a international framework, which was used as the basis of the, I guess, of the local standard, and again that also linked in again with what we discussed earlier in terms of work that happens in Australia and also Turkey in those statistical systems. So the links there between the international and national are quite evident. The third point I'd make is around data quality frameworks and being a guide for best practice. So I think there was some discussion in those presentations about how the data quality framework is used as best practice, is used for training purposes at a regional level and sub-regional level, and gives opportunities to, I guess, and a framework to share information. There was also examples about how data quality is actually used as motivation. So it's also used as an opportunity to, I guess, reward good practices in staff as well. So the linkage there to a wide range of elements with respect to how our staff work. And I guess the final point I'd make is around the first presentation, and that was around, I guess, linking into some of the trade-offs that we have when we're thinking about data quality. So the example that Ms. Henny talked about was around thinking about a new way of cleaning data, which potentially traded off accuracy and timeliness. Now, whether it's more accurate or not is probably up for question, but certainly there was a question about using more automated methods which allowed us to produce statistics that were a lot more timely. And questions that I guess that we need to ask ourselves is how we can think about how we can make those trade-offs. I guess the data quality framework gives us that sort of, I guess, high-level framework to think about those issues, because quality and decisions that we make in the statistical processes are often about trade-offs, and I guess it gives us a common understanding as to how we would go about thinking about those issues. So I'm just looking at the time now. We're at 3:15, so I might break here, and we'll break for half an hour. So we'll be back at 4:45, and there we'll be looking to have the open panel discussion. Thank you. Thank you everyone, and welcome back for the final session for the day. The majority of our panel are here, but I don't think they're too far away. I can see Xia now, so we'll have everyone here in a second. So this is the opportunity for you to ask any questions that you might have for the panel. I guess this is, like I said, I'm sure that as we discussed earlier today, issues of quality did come up in terms of the conversation that we had around both institutional framework and institutional settings in countries, as well as in thinking about it from the capacity screening point of view. So I'm sure there's many questions out there, so I'll pass it over to the floor to see if there are any people who had questions. Jen.
Thank you. Well, I might not do a question, but I just want to add on what I think the more you ended with this discussion about the balancing or the trade-off between the different quality dimensions. Because it's very nice to have many quality dimensions, but what to do in practice? Because you always have, there are some contradictions between the different dimensions. And how are you able to balance this in practice and reality? I can talk a bit about the experience we had in Statistics Norway when I was working there. We made a review, had a process of review of statistical areas. I think that's a very practical approach. We used sort of variants of total quality management called lean methodology, which is also stressing very much the efficiency of the organization, focusing on resource usage and so on. So we had a program for review of the different statistical areas. And there was a team composed by different background, by human resource management, by theoretical statistician and so on. And we had a review program in the different areas. And then we made a process mapping together with the staff in that area. We looked into the bottlenecks, where there are problems, what could be the quality issues, what type of methodology did they use, what type of IT systems did they use. So it was also a question of harmonization of methodology and IT. And so we tried to get all aspects of that, how well was documentation in different areas, and we made then a program for improvement. And then, of course, how could we balance the different aspects? One different aspect to measure, of course, is user relevance or user satisfaction. And what we did was to establish focus groups. We invited users for a special session where we had a program, what are the issues in this statistics? Is it timeliness? Is it exact accuracy? What are the major issues from a user point of view they could in this area? And then, of course, you could a direct dialogue with some selection of users in a focused, in a very structured environment. Of course, it doesn't solve every problem, but at least it showed quite easily that there are lots of inefficiency in the organization, lots of lack of communication, where you could improve standardization, you could improve documentation, and of course there came up quite a lot of quality issues as well in this process of review. So I would suggest this is a quite, I think also in the case of Philippines you mentioned this sort of review approach, and I think it's quite practical approach in order to look on the whole all aspects of quality. So that's my input.
Thank you. I think another point you made, which I think was a really important one there, Jan, was around the user perspective on quality. I think that, Xia, you also mentioned that in your presentation about in the CPI that obviously we statisticians will have a view on the dimensions of quality and where we sit on those, but ultimately it sits with our users in terms of are they fit for purpose in terms of making decisions. And I think getting that user experience and user perspective on quality is a critical one, because it helps us to understand where on those dimensions do we fit. Fazrul, did you have
Yeah,
a question? Comment?
back to Jen questions just now. Looking back at the GSPPM, that is the way I think it should be looked upon the quality assurance. We look back at what the requirements and the review process need to be in both sides, whether it's the user and your internal user and yourself. There are 9 steps of it, and the review should be looked upon and the team to be selected, I think. Not it's just a one time off, it's just a team. Each year you review the team that needed to be looked upon and reviewed all those GSPPM steps. That's one of the things that if you stick to only one process of it, only one method of pricing is one variable, and the only thing is that does it need to be looked upon every time? There's a strenuous process of it. You have to do, let's just say, as Janet mentioned, does your user has any problem with that? That I think that should be noted along. Then the review back all those process of the metadata, the sampling methods, all those things. If the user does not have any problem with that, then if this needed, then the team should be selected. That's one of the opinion. Thank you.
Thanks, Fazrul. I guess for the panel, was there any comments there on how quality assessments are used by decision makers in your countries? Have you got any sort of comments on that?
Actually, it's with respect to the user, it's internal use of the data. We look statistically, we do a statistical methodology by looking at the CVs of the various indicators that we get. So to determine the succeeding operations, so in determining the survey design, so we look at the CVs of all the variables, let's say value added for a survey operation for all the industries that we will take.
And is there any consultation with users of those statistics, like in terms of the actual external users as well?
Internal users, in terms of the one that designs the survey methodology.
Right. Okay. And Ingsai, I'm not sure whether you had any comments on you mentioned about the users' perspectives on the CPI. There was some comments there around how that in terms of establishing the user, it's not just a quality assessment which is done from a producer perspective, but also the users as well. Did you have any sort of comments on how you went about that process? That's okay. Can I just go to the floor if there's any other questions? Suzanne? Suzanne first and then down here, thanks.
Thank you. I think my question is probably more for the second and third presenters who have talked about how they have used the quality assurance framework in their statistical office. My question is, what were your agency's experience in developing and implementing the data quality assurance frameworks, and especially in terms of getting the compilers on board, as their work would be more closely scrutinized and looked at and compared against the quality assurance criteria? Thank you.
The government of Mongolia acknowledges the need for revising the law on statistics for implementation of the quality policy. So Mongolian government and also our organization are interested in the steps taken by developed countries, such as expanding the descriptions of standards, indicators, and mandates so that official duties and obligations are clear, determining the scopes of national statistical system and guaranteeing that all provisions and frameworks are realistic. So it means they comply with the available resources and skills, as well as correspond with the current level of economic and also technical development.
Dulcie, did you have any other comments on that one?
As I have discussed in my presentation, we use the data quality framework in terms of providing rewards in the conduct of the survey, and at the same time, we use statistical methods in assessing the result of the survey by using the coefficient of variance in some indicators, so that the succeeding operation will utilize more or less a good method in capturing the samples for the survey.
Thank you, Dulcie. It sounded like that what you're sort of saying there is that rather than compilers not being on board, I think that you're using the data quality as a way of setting benchmarks and key performance indicators, which I guess set some goals that people can try to achieve. So I think that's a real positive way to use that and to get staff on board. There was a question up front here.
From Central Statistics Office, India. Actually, this is more a comment rather than a question. What I wanted to say is that when you consider the economic statistics, especially national accounts, within the data quality framework, I think you have to integrate the revisions also along with this, especially when it comes to the sub-national level, especially in a large country like India, where we have the estimates of GDP compiled at the sub-national level also. The extent of revision is also to be it plays a major role in determining the data quality. So I think this is a very important thing, that this has to be integrated with the data quality framework. That is the comment I had.
Thank you very much for that comment. I think it's a very important one, because in terms of data quality, I think we're not just talking about a statistical process in terms of sample surveys. Statistical data quality frameworks, I think, need to be robust enough to go across all statistical processes. And I think your point about revisions is a good one. I think that most national accountants or people who contribute to the national accounts in this room would understand some of the challenges that you're talking about there. I myself are in the government finance statistics space, and I know that that's one of the challenges that I have in terms of the government's contribution into the public sector measures in the national accounts. Where are these revisions? Where are they coming in? That's really, it's not about sampling error, because we have a full census in most cases, but it's non-sampling error exactly. And I think that doesn't mean that it's not part of data quality in terms of accuracy, but again, we're trading off their potentially accuracy with timeliness. Our quarterly statistics come out a lot faster than our annual ones. So I think that's a very good example of one of the practical challenges that we have. What I would say, though, is that the data quality frameworks we use, again, give us an opportunity to have that type of discussion, bringing it back to Jan's comment about user satisfaction. You can actually go through and talk about those different elements, talk about the fact that we get something more timely, but that comes at a cost in terms of accuracy and revisions. So I think that's a way that that we can use those frameworks at a local level to have sensible conversations about some of the trade-offs that we're looking at. Sorry, can you go then, Fazrul?
Thanks. I'm actually from RBI, Reserve Bank of India, who's the Central Bank of India. So we have some of the departments of RBI contributes to the national account compilation, but RBI is predominantly the user of the data. Now, from a user perspective, you mentioned during your presentation that people will use the data only when they have faith in the data. Now, generally from a user perspective, what we see is that let's talk about national accounts, GDP data. We try to see that whether the other macroeconomic indicators are moving in the direction which can be explained, in the sense that if you have a very high GDP and you have very low, say, inflation, then it becomes a kind of difficult to explain because generally when you have very high GDP and we tend to think that there is an aggregate demand in the system which actually should pull the inflation on the higher side. So and also the high frequency data, with that we try to look at and try to kind of guess whether this data is going to, it's gelling with the understanding we have. But from the perspective of compiler, how do you actually measure the quality? When we talk about data quality, there are some best practices which we follow, that's fine, but is there any way to actually measure the quality, or when you control something, you first need to some way of measuring that, right? Is there any way of mechanism by which you can actually measure this, or there is nothing of that sort? You actually follow certain best practices which has evolved over the period of time, and that actually gives you that confidence that this data or quality is higher, or how do you actually do that?
Thanks. I can lead off, and then maybe Fazrul, you might have a comment about that.
Yeah, I was about to ask the same questions because
okay, you go.
From the user perspective, non-technical officers or the public, inflation is very close to them, especially when talk about CPI, because the CPI to them is personal experience, right? They are experiencing the price momentum. If you're going too very fast, it's going to be slower. But sometimes it's not reflected throughout the CPI numbers. Okay, let's say they are experiencing on the baskets of goods for the fishes, they are experiencing the hike of 20%, but at the end of the month, CPI is showing up 4%. So, there is nothing wrong with the data. How is the National Quality Assurance can really, that when you do the quality assurance, there's nothing wrong with the system. But basically, you're not able to suppress the public opinion of they are experiencing very high or high volatility of the prices. How is that you leverage on you're speaking on the technicality, yes, you are right. You have done this, you have checked this, you have done almost everything that need to be assured in terms of the quality of the data. But the perspective of the final user, the masses, they can't really understand how you communicate that with your quality assurance framework to the masses that this has been done, this has been done. Can you further elaborate that?
I can put some comments and then happy to pass on to other members of the panel or anyone else who had any thoughts on that one. But my take would be that it comes down to, I'm thinking of it in the ABS data quality framework because that's what's indoctrinated into me. But coherence is what comes to mind in terms of the dimension of quality that you're talking about there. And I think yourself as well, sir, was around the coherence with other measures. I think for me, we have to have an understanding of what people's expectations are. So part of that would be, there's two elements to that. One is, like yourself, sir, from India and RBBI, if we know what some of those indicators are, we should be working with you to understand what your expectations are. And so that when we're actually looking at our statistics, we have an understanding of, well, where do we think it's going to land? And if it doesn't land there, then we know we've got some explaining to do. And it's trying to understand exactly how does that fit. Now, we don't need to know exact processes or anything like that, but I would say that forms part of the process around setting your expectations around where you would be sitting. Fazrul, with your sort of quick comment around whether the measures are sitting with public opinion in terms of how things move. I guess that's a difficult one, and I don't think I have any real answers for that. I think what I would say though is that it's a constant struggle that I think that all national statistical officers face. Thinking about it from the Australian context, we have a lot of scrutiny about our labour force statistics and what can and can't be measured monthly through a labour force survey. I think our users have an expectation that we can measure lots and lots of different things at lots and lots of different, very detail. But what we can actually do is somewhere a bit lower than what they expect there. Now, part of that for us is trying to make sure there's a clear understanding about what it is and what it isn't measuring. But part of it also is working through and educating to actually have that understanding. I see some smiles, but I would say that at least from our context, that has been working, albeit slowly. I think it's one that takes time, so that, for example, in that labour force example I mentioned, we tried to move away from getting people to look at original or seasonally adjusted numbers to look at those movements, because it would move up and down by by percentage points, which was enough to move share markets and the like. We tried to move people's views to more the trend, so that the month-to-month movement, which in the trend would be a lot less volatile, and as a result of that, there'd be, I guess, a less focus on some of the more difficult measurement aspects. Dr. Jan.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. I would like to just add to your comment and Fazlur's comment and response to his question as well. Everybody knows that assessment of quality in statistics is a very difficult task. Usually when we are assessing the statistics, there are two perspectives, as you clearly mentioned. Producer-oriented perspective and another, the user's perspective. Producer-oriented perspective is usually inbuilt in the system, statistical system, that how to plan and how to operate and how to edit the data and data cleaning and data analysis, tabulation and report generation up to that. All steps are inbuilt, and there are always cross-check inside. The cross-checks in initial stage, you might hear about the response rates, the item non-response, unit non-response. There are process of imputation for item non-response and some process of estimation. There is a difference between imputation and estimation. So usually the inbuilt process by itself is guaranteeing whether the things are going right or wrong. For example, I would share one example. Last year, we were computing a quantum index, IIP, Industrial Production Index. Particularly the sugar production growth was higher. And inbuilt system, we saw that the cane crop growth was negative. So that was a question for us, that how the crop growth is negative and its output, the production, sugar production is positive. So what are the reasons? So we went inside and investigated the process, and we also took different measures, going from top to bottom, the sources, that the third generation source. The source is the industry. Industry is providing the data to association, association is providing data to the Ministry of Industry, then Ministry of Industry is further providing to us. So we went to each and every step, but still the production was there. Then we found that further analyzing the things, so two things comes out. One, that the sugar production, converting the cane into sugar, so the percentage of conversion was last year 9.5, this time that was improved to 10.5, 10.6. And another thing, that some carryover production of the inside the sugar mills were also there. So we always investigate the things inside. There is no hard and fast rule that could be properly defined in front of or exposed to people, but still the process is inbuilt and the quality is measured. As far as the user's perspective content is concerned, that is very critical in nature. That is critical process. The users usually looking to the growth or looking to the data and relating it to the word availability environment. Like you said, the CPI, in CPI context, they're usually observing the prices in the market also, but the CPI is also the institution, the statistical institution is also collecting the prices from the same market. But it is depending on the user's basket, what the user is using the basket, and of course, the statistical system is using an enhanced basket, a large basket. So for that large basket, something might be going up and down. So the critics from the user's perspective comes when they are using limited basket. So this is also means such kind of criticism comes in, but still the process by itself is trying to assess itself. Another legal framework of statistical system, this is also ensuring the quality, legal framework. Just now, I heard one presentation from either from Mongolia or from Philippines that was elaborating, starting from the legal framework that was in that legal framework, I saw that everything was defined, even in the start, definition, and definition was covering, usually when we are writing documents or we are producing a law, then the items are usually in general. But I saw in their definition, every aspect was touched. Even the small aspects were also touched in their definitions and that functional approach. So if such kind of legal document is available, then the people will trust on it that, okay, they are doing this small thing as well, and that is also legalized and available in the act or in the law. So usually the process, the assessment process is inbuilt on one side, and also from the user's perception. For that, one can go for user perception survey, and from that side, it is also judged critically. So both of them making the data more responsive and more reliable, on which one can develop faith and rely on it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Chan. Any other comments Just maybe say one more thing on that point that you made there. I think the element that you talked about that you mentioned was around trust. And I think I mentioned that earlier too, around data quality is around looking at trying to build that trust with users. To get to your point around, is there an overall measure of quality, like is the quality a 10 this month and is it a 9 next month, etc.? I don't think we'll ever get to that. There will be certain elements where we know that. So for example, within a sampling framework, there are numeric measures that we can use. But for something like national accounts, I know colleagues that are a lot smarter than I am have tried to look at that, and I think that that's something that it's a fool's errand to try to work that out. So my take would be that if you are looking to build that trust, it's about being open and honest with your users, particularly around where are the areas that you see the strength in your data, but also where are the areas that you see weakness. So if you have some indicators that are stronger than others, then my take would be that it's worthwhile to have that conversation up front, because users will know probably more than you do in terms of the detail that they're expecting. And often the case is that the weak areas are the areas where they don't necessarily meet with expectations and are later revised, or whatever it is that can happen. So I think it's worthwhile to make sure that you're having that open and transparent conversation as to how your statistics are being produced. Were there any other comments? Thank you.
Thank you very much for all presentation. And my question is actually, you provide different dimension and criteria for measuring data quality assurance framework. And I'm very interested to know that which dimension or criteria is more challenging to be improved in the other countries. And the other question is, this criteria or dimension is efficient enough to measuring or evaluating when we want to evaluate the quality of other administrative data. I mean that are this dimension is useful or usable to evaluate the other quality of other administrative data in other organization related to the official statistic or not? Thank you.
Thanks for that. I can address the second one and then maybe open it up to the panel for the first question about which is the most challenging dimension for data quality improvement. Certainly the data quality frameworks, all of them, as I was mentioning, around national accounts or survey statistics, I think that those are generic enough to be used for other sources of data, which would include administrative data sets. So certainly speaking from the Australian experience there, in terms of all data that's produced by the ABS, which might be from administrative data sources, would go through that framework, and we certainly encourage others within our national statistical family to use that framework as a way of quality assuring their data sources. So I think that the frameworks are generic enough to be used in that broader sense. Not sure if the panel had any comments on the most challenging elements of data quality from their perspectives.
For us, the most challenging one is in terms of accessibility of microdata, because for establishment-based survey, it should be confidential. So in terms of addressing those, that challenge is we are actually establishing a data enclave for researchers to use, but basically it's not online. You have to go to the office. Okay, that's one of the challenges for us. So we have to actually access some methods wherein researchers will be able to capture the data on the data enclave by providing software that are easy to use for them.
Thanks for that, Dulcie. Did anyone have any other comments specifically around particular challenges from their perspective and from their country experience?
Okay.
Thanks,
I remember when in 2015, several surveys in Statistic Indonesia conducted quality gates, and for 5 surveys, I guess in my subdirectorate hotel statistics, for the dimension of the quality assurance, I guess the accuracy is it's more challenging, because based on the quality gates in 2015, only 42% the level of accuracy. I guess the more challenging than the others of dimension.
Thanks, Henny. I was just going to sort of, I guess, concur with the issue around trying to get accessibility of microdata. I mentioned that, I think, in the institutional settings earlier today. It's a real, I think there is a real want for more detailed information by policymakers in particular, and I think we're sort of, Dulcie's reflecting that that's the same in the Philippines as well. And I think that one of the challenges are around balancing our, I guess, the trust that we are trying to give our users in terms of confidentiality with, on the other side, accessibility to information. ABS has tried to address that through, I guess, looking at a trusted user model. So where we do have different levels of trust depending on who the user is, and as a result of that, the access to detailed information such as microdata would potentially be available. So you'd need to go through like some type of vetting process to have that access. So ensuring that it's being used for a statistical purpose, you know, that there are appropriate safeguards in place, there are appropriate penalties if you don't follow the rules. So there are a range of ways to make sure that that there is some, I guess, you're giving access for some of the challenging areas there that you're mentioning, Dulcie, but also trying to improve access. Now, my take on that is that it's sort of a open-ended door. I mean, you can you give more access, and I think there's more and more and more that our users are going to require. There's going to be a point where you have to say no, but I think that again, trying to hear your users and trying to work with them in terms of what is possible given your institutional setting, I think is an important conversation to have. Builds on the other element I mentioned before about trust. I mean, that's ultimately one of the biggest pieces of trust we can give someone is access to detail, and I think that you would find, and the experience that we have is that if you're giving that to a trusted user, it shows that you have faith in them, which I think builds a relationship, which when we talk about some of the issues around coordination, become an important way to build goodwill across and coordinate when you're looking to coordinate across partners. I had one comment and I guess question, and it was more directed to Henny, whose presentation was slightly different than the others because I guess it was focusing more on quality, a specific element of quality assurance. From my perspective, and whilst we are going to be talking, we do have a session later on big data, so don't want to steal too much thunder for that presentation, but I guess Henny's work that she presented was an example of how we could utilise quality using, I guess, using different methods to improve our statistical processes, and was presenting that in the context of, I guess, the data quality. I guess my sort of question was around, you mentioned this being a study. What do you think the next steps would be if you were looking to move from it being a study to actually implementation, and how would you go about doing that?
Okay, thank you for the question. Basically, the idea is to reduce the cost and the labor in the processing, in data processing or data cleansing. So we will offer this approach to our leader. So the process in data processing in economic census or other surveys will be more efficiently. Thank you.
So it's really around trying to give them a bit about the benefits there, and as we sort of talked about some of those trade-offs, the timeliness one, I think, was one that that there was a significant potential improvement through looking at that methodology. So thank you for that. I wanted to raise, I guess there was one last question that I had, and I guess it's perhaps a bit of a controversial one. I'll get to you, Joseph, in a second. Thanks. I'll just finish my comment, and then I'll hand over to you. So I guess it's a question for the room, so happy for people to get to have their responses here. But I think that one of the challenges that we have in statistical offices is that we do have limited resources. And I guess a controversial statement would be, is this all worth it? I mean, quality assessments, are they actually fit for purpose in terms of what our users are looking at? And do the costs of actually putting these sometimes quite large documents together, do they actually outweigh the potential benefits? That's a question. I'm not sure whether people have any comments or reflections on that from the floor or from the panel. Ali, go ahead.
Thank you, Jonathan. Well, my take on the question is the fact that data quality assessment framework is a very, very important factor in terms of producing statistics. But in terms of this, looking at the resource constraint, then the data quality assessment framework would then become a secondary sort of activity, in a sense that normally we have this, for example, the IMF Article 4 sort of review, which gives us, which gives most countries a good test of that sort of data consistency checks around from the statistics that are being produced by the Bureau, and the statistics that are also being produced by the central bank, which are more monetized statistics. So once I cannot discount the fact that data quality assessment framework, but in our experience is the fact that we cannot run it in parallel with the production, considering the fact that we have very limited resources. But it is very, very important that we conduct that data quality assessment framework on a more ad hoc basis, like annual basis or after 2 years. That would give us a good sort of assessment of where we are. And I mentioned the IMF sort of Article 4. In our case, they came every 2 years. And that really gives us a lot of check and balance in terms of what we produce and what our other friends, like the central bank, does in terms of data confrontation, which also gives a check on the other criteria of the data quality assessment framework. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. Any other reflections? Yes.
Hello to everyone. I'm Övünç Uysal from Turkstat. I just want to make a reflection on the quality assessment regarding the SDGs indicators, global indicator framework. I just wanted to mention that quality framework and quality assessment are the key property of NSOs as their function in a national statistical system, especially controlling and coordinating the other national data producers, I mean concerning the SDGs, because otherwise UN agencies, UNFPA, OECD, all of them, I mean, there are 33 UN agencies and international organizations that are custodian agencies on SDGs, and they would just release their estimations on global level and on country level. I mean, on many SDG indicators are not produced, are unavailable on national level. So when you try to make them available, when you try to increase your national statistical capacity, the key property would be the quality framework of national statistical offices. I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Joseph, I might pass on to you.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to reflect on the quality that came up, a quality dimension that came up again and again and again. I think we need to take a step back and just look at the basics, especially when it comes to economic statistics. For example, supply as defined in economics is equal to demand, right? So we have basic identities in economics that needs to be satisfied through the data that you collect. So in most statistical systems, you would have a supply side surveys as well as demand side surveys. So in theory, supply has to equal to demand. And even if you take the price differential, so the supply side price would be producer price, and the demand side would be the purchaser price. The differential would be just the margin, trade, transport, and taxation. If that is not satisfied, then obviously there's an issue with quality. If it is satisfied, you have satisfied the requirement for quality. And obviously the quality of the data collected through various means would not be the same because of the resources you put in or the survey respondents and so on, right? So you try to fix or you try to determine which side, which survey, which data collection vehicle is of higher quality. And then you make an assessment of what would be the error. And often in statistical publications, you would have an error term. So that is a reflection of the differential between your supply and the demand side, right? Or you could say, for example, taxation. If you said 10% of every sales is taxed, and we know there was $1,000 worth of sales, obviously you should be collecting $100. And if the tax authorities did not report $100, either the tax authorities are wrong or the sales numbers are wrong. So depending on who you chose to believe or you determined to be believed, that becomes your standard. Anyway, that is my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. I'm Annie from BPS Statistics Indonesia. Actually, I would like to share our experience in BPS. Except Henny already mentioned about the utilization of QAF in economic census, I also would like to add another experience. It is related to our statistical capacity building program, Change and Reform for the Development of Statistics. We call StatCap Cerdas. Under this program, actually, we also apply quality assurance framework. This has a specific purpose to improve our data quality produced by BPS. We also apply each dimension of quality of the quality, and we follow UNCC standard. But in this case, I just would like to share our experience just applied in the latest economic census. Especially, we applied quality gate in every statistical activities. Start from the data collection and then data processing, data analysis. We apply, we call quality gate. In this case, we have a specific form to assess or to evaluate, for instance, the supervisor of the enumerators. We assess their performance, whether they conduct the checking of the enumerator performance is already follow the rules. If we found the data is inconsistency, the data is empty, so we will evaluate that the enumerator is not done very well. This our quality gate in the data collection, this the example. And then once we come to the second activity followed by the GSPBM process also, in the data processing, we also again applied quality gate. Here we consider about the accuracy also, and we also apply specific rule or a specific regulation to apply quality gate in this step. And this is actually part of our QAF quality assurance framework under StatCap Cerdas program. And now we are still try to finalize our QAF based on our practical experience. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that experience. Any other comments? No? Well, I might just make a couple of comments to sort of wrap up that session. I think probably the key sort of message that I asked a relatively provocative question at the end there around, you know, does the benefit outweigh the cost? I think that I did that a little bit on purpose because I suspected that the answer would be, well, I think there is benefit, and I think that there is the frameworks are relevant, and I think that the reasons why they're relevant is that if you listen to the conversation that we had today, basically it covered all the dimensions of quality. We were talking about accuracy, you know, did it meet, you know, how did it actually fit in terms of our measurable accuracy for sampling and non-sampling error? Is it coherent with either user expectations or media or other people? What's the institutional environment that we're using to put together statistics? How does it compare with other expectations? So I think that there's I think that we can sort of see that there's there are strong links. And of course, it's not just about users within our country. Obviously, international frameworks now, international requirements do require us to have a look at that on a fairly regular basis, depending on things like whether it's IMF Article 4 or other external requirements that we have within our countries. I think that the other element that I think that was also mentioned is that there are strong links between the quality frameworks that we're talking about here and also quality for some of the other external requirements like the SDGs, and again the NSOs as I guess leaders of statistical systems within countries have a coordinating role to play in terms of making sure that statistics are of high quality for countries, and the quality frameworks that we apply allow us to make that link. So with that, I will close this session. I wanted you to join me in thanking the presenters and also thank you to everyone for their contributions.
Good. Thank you very much, Jonu, for organizing this session. I think there were a lot of good thoughts and reflections in the room. Thank you again also to the three presenters for your excellent contributions. So this is the end of day number 1 of our seminar. So thank you very much. We will be continuing tomorrow morning in this room at 9 o'clock. We'll start by a little recap of today, and then we'll go straight into the session on natural resources and environment statistics. So do have an enjoyable evening, and see you fresh and in good spirits tomorrow morning.